Come, Holy Spirit, come now, come as you wish. Come, Holy Spirit, come now, come as you wish. Come, Holy Spirit, come now, come as you wish. I would like to recommend you the book. It's already an old book, at least 20, 30 years. Anselm Green is a German Benedictine. He was writing this Heaven Begins Within You, and was taking this wisdom from the desert fathers, is the early Christianity, when both men and women, they were going out of the civilized cities, villages, and going to the desert to devote themselves completely to the service to God, to the prayer, and to be transformed by the grace. The passages of this book is the passions, appetites, according to the Evagrius, Ponticus Evagrius from Pont, and you can see is the ancient time. I present you is just tiny overview of this. It's much more in the book, so it's available both on Amazon and in printed version, so you can get it. Evagrius divided this structure, human structure, into 3 columns: desirous, emotional, and intellectual part. And there was a very simple goal. The goal was the inner freedom. So when I was reading this book on my spiritual readings, I was trying to remember after the passing desirous part. When I came to emotional, I was even more confused, because which applies to me, which doesn't apply for me. So finishing the book, I was going the second time through the book. I took a piece of paper, let me write down. Desirous, emotional, intellectual part. Each one of them had the 3 vices, so there were 9 of them. And I was writing and looking and being from the moment to moment more terrified. I knew I have some of these vices. I didn't know I have them all. So they were not equally developed, but they were somehow all. There's usually one which is dominating somehow in our life, and then others which are coming around. I remember I went for confession, and I was so crushed with this, and all of them. This experienced priest, who was much older than me, he said, start with the easiest. Don't start with the most difficult, start with the easiest, which seems to be the easiest to eliminate, and see how possible it is to get rid, and then gradually deal with them one by one. So in the desirous part, there are 3 of them. There's eating, sexuality, and ownership. And according to them, there are the vices: gluttony, lust, and greed. Then another part, this is the emotional part, the most outside of our structure. There is sadness, anger, and acedia. Sadness is personal wishes go unfulfilled. Anger is an active response to the unfulfilled wishes. And acedia, sometimes translated as sloth, the most dangerous demon which tears the person apart. It's not the most dangerous, it's the most difficult to get rid of it. And the last one is an intellectual part, and then you have thirst for glory, envy, and pride. The first of glory is obvious vanity, envy, a continuous comparison with others, and pride blinds the person, blinds completely. Why should we deal with this? 1,000 years later, a great doctor of the church, St. John of the Cross, he was elaborating from different angle. He was comparing the human soul to a bird, and he was claiming that this bird is called to the union with God, should fly freely. If it's bound, it's not free. The soul that is attached to anything, however much good there might be in it, so it's not necessary evil addiction, evil inclination, will not arrive at the liberty of divine union. And he was explaining in a very vivid way. For whether it be a strong wire rope, the bird will be not able to fly at all, or a slender, a delicate thread that holds the bird, it matters not. He said very clearly, it matters not if it really holds it fast. For until the cord be broken, the bird cannot fly. From the experience of the mystics, our saints, we know that these big chains, these big ropes, they are really cut by God. It's beyond our strength. And God expects from us to tear this little thread, this little addiction, this little thing. And the strange thing is that we refuse to do what is possible to do. So let us see these passions, these appetites, intellectual, thirst for glory, constant boasting in the presence of others. And when I was reading this book, I even didn't know that the thirst of glory is a vice, is a wrong addiction. And you might say, what's wrong with thirst for glory? It's very simple to explain. You are focused on yourself, not on God. And that's what's wrong, because it's God who is the center of the world, not me or you, any one of us. So this constant boasting in the presence of others, it points to me, not to God, not being grateful to the gifts and talents which He gave to me. Anxious to be seen by people. So if you are seen, you do it. If you are not seen, you refuse to do it. And constantly thinking about others and their opinion about me. Once more, focusing on the other person, not on God. Both are wrong. Focusing on yourself or focusing on the other person is wrong center, re-center. So what is the spiritual goal? It's not to be entirely free of it, but be aware of it. We need acceptance, we need approval. We are functioning in the society, and all these things are really important and uplifting, should be uplifting. But there is a very clear advice. Be not dependent on the thirst of recognition. The very simple spiritual exercise could be doing something which no one even knows that you have done it. Picking up garbage, cleaning after some other people, not expecting to be recognized, not expecting to be said thank you, just to glorify God. This blocks this thirst for glory, and this makes you more and more free. Do you want your life to be lived by the opinion of somebody else? Do you want to live your life by other people, or it's your life in front of God to glorify Him? The second intellectual is envy. I can't meet another person without comparing myself with that person. If you need to compare yourself with Jesus, especially on the cross. Compare yourself with Mother Mary, especially standing under the cross, faithful and trustful, believing that the last word belongs to God. These are the only two examples to compare yourself, and I can tell you today, you will lose. Just be aware that all other comparison, you don't know what the other person has, what is the starting point, and that's why it's beyond our insight. If you don't succeed in this comparison, proving my own superiority, I devalue myself. So what is the spiritual warning? If my value is proved only by comparison with others, there is a need for force to overcome others, to show them that I'm better, or there is another very bad option, danger, to fall into a depression because I cannot succeed. It's very dangerous, and this is doing to ourselves. Why would you do it? It's not the other person, it's me doing it to myself. And the third intellectual, it's pride, causes the worst fall of the person. This is the vice of the devil. This is the pride which destroys. Identifies oneself with an ideal image, everything good. And surely there is some kind of goodness in each one of us. Even in some criminals, there is some kind of goodness. But there is also the other side. Refuses to take a look at your own reality. So glorifying God for these things which are good and fighting the things which are not of God, which shouldn't be in our life. This is what should be our approach. So the spiritual effects, I tell the whole world what is right, but I don't know myself at all. The usual side effect of it, when somebody persists in this, nobody listens to this person. And by the example, you might help others much better than by telling and doing nothing. Denying my own earthliness, I won't be able to see clearly. So you have to be aware of your strength, you have to be aware of your limitation. And this protects us from being proud, from falling into the worst of these vices. The other columns of this thing is the emotional part, and to them they belong sadness, anger, and acedia. Acedia sometimes translated as sloth, but acedia is much broader, much deeper, ancient church term. Sadness, you have to know the distinction. Sadness is not the sorrow. And you have to know it. When it is described, you can very clearly see the difference. Sadness cannot weep. They will tie their teeth, they will show everybody how they are unhappy, but they will refuse to react on normal level. The sorrow can weep, can express the feelings, can point to the losses, can show the root of this sorrow. So sadness is unfruitful self-pity, once more focused on yourself. And sorrow shows the experience of loss, experience of mourning, and all these things which happen with disappointment and innocent suffering. Sadness is the running away from the reality by fruitless clinging to the past or projecting to the future, but not really being in time, not really being in the present moment. And sorrow is a very essential part of maturity. You have to win the whole war. You don't win all the battles. So you have to know which battles are important, and even if you lost important battle, that you will know how to make improvements. So the spiritual goal, first of all, do not be afraid of sorrow. There is nothing wrong if you are sorrowful, but it's something wrong if you are sad. And one can learn a great deal for the present from the past, embracing the actual life, not this what is only in your head, what is only in your dreams. And anger. Anger is the most vehement of the passions because it's visible, it's annoying, attacking others. Anger disrupts our perception. It's very often if somebody talks to you angrily, just say to the person, "Good morning," see if they will answer. Most probably no, because they don't see you. They talk to their anger, they don't talk to you. And that's what is really wrong. If you don't even see the other person, how can you really make any kind of logical argument? If it lasts for a long time, it transforms into resentments. And the resentments is very difficult to get rid. We had some of this yesterday on the healing service, so you might know how they are devastating and how dangerous it is to allow the anger to grow into resentment. And anger also weakens the body. You might get some kind of psychological or produced by the psychological sickness which is visible in your body. Anger is an uncontrolled aggression, so it is very unpleasant, especially to those who have to face it, and also prevents from praying. Anger can produce loss of appetite. Anger will stuff you with negative feelings, make a person sick, really sick. So there was a great warning of the spiritual effect from the Desert Fathers that the demon of anger eats up the human soul. The more often you are angry, you are like losing your own soul, eaten by the devil. So don't allow to be go this way, because you might lose the most important part of your being. And the last in emotional is acedia, sloth, a noonday devil, or the demon of midlife. And everyone somehow faces it, everyone has to cross some kind of crisis. And the crisis is not to destroy us, but to embrace the new reality in your life and proceed. Acedia is flight from real life, incapacity to be in the moment, refusing to see where you really are. It's a hatred of the place, present, life, and work. You came out, you are unhappy in Ohio, you came to Florida, you are still unhappy. There's nothing wrong with the state. What is wrong in your mind? No desire to work or to pray. No enjoyment in anything. So you have work, you are unhappy that you have work and the work is too difficult. You have time to rest, you are unhappy that you have nothing to do and you have to rest. And whatever is, there's something wrong in the head. There's nothing wrong with work or recreation or anything like this. So the spiritual goal for those who face it, rediscover God's purpose for your soul. It's not only this, what is from outside. Learn a new meaning for the second part of life. Find new goals or the forgotten goals. Many of the parents, they have many dreams, many goals, and then the duties and responsibility of the family, they put all the goals aside. Okay? These birds are flying out of the house. You can return to your dreams, to your goals, or maybe you rediscover something which you have completely forgotten. Move from the outside to the inside. One of my surprises when I was going for silent retreat, this 8-day silent retreat, there was the big two groups of participants. Let's say there were 90, 100 of these people there, and majority were the young people, like students from college. I presume they were playing hooky, running away from college. They could afford it. And the grandparents, because their duty were over and they moved from outside to inside. This what was impossible because of the parenting and many other obligations. It's possible to do in the second part of life. There is a very huge spiritual consolation. If this demon is conquered, and is the most difficult to conquer, another won't be able to come quickly to replace him. So there is a purpose of fighting it back, and there is a big, very consoling victory if you find this new meaning for the second part of life. And the last part is the desirous part. And we have their eating, we have their sexuality, and we have their ownership. Let us start with the eating problem, stuffing ourselves with negative feelings and compensate by food. Please, pleasure in eating. There is nothing wrong in pleasure with eating, but this is not the primary thing in pleasure. The primary thing is to nourish your body. So it might look nicely, it might be very tasty, but if it doesn't nourish, it's waste of your activity. There is nothing wrong to enjoy this nourishment, but this is not the primary thing. You see that food might become a replacement for love. And it's very dangerous if it happens, and very unhealthy if it happens. So the spiritual goal to become one with God. This is one of the purposes of the praying, sharing the table with Jesus. If you want some shortest prayer before meal, Lord Jesus, sit down with me. And if you want to be polite, you can add please. He will join, he will come, and he will share your meal, he will share life with you. You are allowed, you are invited to enjoy God. There is nothing wrong with this. But focus what is the purpose of it and don't lose it. So the second is the sexuality. Great for the body. Sometimes you might marvel, why do you even have it? You know what this other body has. You didn't experience this particular body. Why would you go this direction? And don't allow to go for these senseless temptations to some kind of self-destruction. Experiencing frustration or disappointment is very often using sex as an escape or perverting sex into an obstructions against God. It's very useful if you have any kind of addiction, a kind of problem, to see what is the root of it. Very often it has nothing to do with sexuality. It's just reacting to some disappointment, frustration, or anything else, and instead of solving the problem, you are adding to this problem. It's mostly outside, so That's why it's the most vulnerable. That's why it's so easy to be distracted, to be attacked. And then also this illusion to flee from reality. Illusive world of sexual satisfaction, sexual fantasies, which do not really exist in life. So why would you like your life to look like an illusion? I remember one of my experiences, a young married woman, she was sharing that her mother got her on some pornography as a teenager, and instead of scolding her or whatever, she sat down together and explaining, this is what you see on website or maybe that time printing matter. This doesn't exist in a normal, happy family. This is what they are proposing there. It's physical impossibility to put in practice 24/7. So it's an illusion. It doesn't exist. And we were surprised when her witnessing said this one lesson was enough to put all these things aside. If it's illusion, I don't want my life to be an illusion, and dropping it immediately. So, spiritual goal of sexuality, longing for vitality, for self-transcendence. If you have any kind of temptation, desires, that's first of all nothing wrong with you, but I would observe it. What God does say to improve your marriage life, communication, or He calls you to more intimacy with Himself, more prayer, more sacraments, more attending adoration, coming maybe during the week for Mass. These desires might point from outside to inside need which is not satisfied or to which God is calling you. Sex seen as the expression of love, not as the satisfaction of lust. Years ago, I met with people who could be my parents. I was so surprised when there's some kind of tension in the family. Why are you coming close to each other? What is the purpose? What is the intention? And the people who had 30, 40 years of experience of marriage, they were looking at me like a stupid one. What do I want from them? They have forgotten the primary thing. I'm coming to you to express my love to you. If you are looking for lust, excitement, any kind of satisfaction or anything, that's not love. But see what will happen to improve the relationship if you will come to the clear intention. I'm coming to you with this expression of my love. And see what is happening there. And God will never leave you with nothing. There will be something. This something could be peace in your heart, which will last much longer than the sexual attraction and satisfaction, for days, sometimes weeks. So seeing sex expression of love is the spiritual goal to get out of this trouble. And the integrated sexuality is the goal. You don't deny it, you use it for the benefit of your person and the others. Life of substinence, more exposure to it. Be aware when you are single, and especially this applies to priests, brothers, sisters, that we idealize family. It's like my sister was challenging her child, what will you do if your children will not listen to you? And the little Gabriel was saying, oh, my children will always listen to me. Oh, yeah. The same in the marriage. Oh, my marriage will be perfect. And this is what is the really wrong. From Switzerland, I don't remember the name, one woman who was making some research on the divorces. And she found that the people who were the very first to divorce in very short time, they were just in the denial of the sorrowful mysteries. Like we have in the Rosary. Joyful, luminous, sorrowful, glorious mysteries. Oh no, all of them, yes, but not sorrowful. The moment you enter into relationship, the moment you start to love someone, it's unavoidable sorrowful mysteries. In very simple way, somebody was offended, somebody was rejected, somebody was badly treated at the job. And if it doesn't affect you as a spouse, that's something wrong with you. The moment you enter the relationship, it's always this thing, but remember real life. There are still glorious mysteries available, but you cannot go completely around the suffering, sorrowful mysteries. I met many of the families, and the same applies to the priestly vocation, that these sorrowful mysteries, in a very strange way, they are binding us closer to Christ or closer to each other. It's amazing that they bound us much more effective and much more lasting than any kind of joyful or glorious things in our life. And the last one is the ownership. So there's nothing wrong with ownership. There's nothing wrong for the striving for possession. But it's something wrong if you have this mental desire, mental hunger for possession. Having more and more and more, and having more than you can eat and use in your one life, and still being unsatisfied. This is called avarice. And it's a most pointed vice because it separates us from God. There are many things which we cannot buy. And being never satisfied with everything, whatever you have. And sometimes this experience of being not satisfied is a good experience. Why? Especially in United States, you might find it's maybe not that huge number, but it's quite logical and quite determined number of the people who experienced that you cannot buy joy, love, health, wisdom, and other things for money, and they turn to God. They turn to the spiritual, from outside to inside, and then got satisfaction. So the spiritual goal is the true riches, God in my soul. Any time when you are at Mass, any time of receiving the Holy Communion, you have Jesus for yourself, at least for these 10 minutes. True treasure in your own heart, at the total disposal to you. Use it wisely. Talk to Him. Pray, ask, be sorry. External possession can be dropped because of this presence in me, this mysterious presence of God in me. And it's a very common experience that suddenly the person who was striving for all these gadgets and all these things around suddenly doesn't need it, or if they are fine, if they are not, also fine, because discovering this treasure in the heart. And the spiritual poverty protects very powerfully, protects from the desire for possession. The spiritual poverty is depending on God. You might have plenty and still having this conscience depending on God. And you can have nothing and still being somehow independent, disconnected with God. So remember about these passions, these appetites which are in us. We should be free to fly, free from all the chains. Start with the easiest. It doesn't matter if it's desirous, emotional, intellectual part. Start with the easiest one. Get rid of the easiest, and then one by one. There is very secure, very sure goal of it. The goal is inner freedom. This is what brings the best version of ourselves, the best development of ourselves. But we have to be willing, when you discover it, to cut it, to make yourself free, and allowing God to take us where He wants us to be.